welcome to the presentation on timing and consistency and the importance of timing consistency and ways to achieve it. We're going to look at the why, what and how of playing with consistency of sound and technique. Look at ways to apply these ideas to help you with your own playing, and drill down into the college certificate syllabi from Pipe Bands Australia with specific focus on all things timing, like time, phrase, beat, pulse, groove, tempo, drive, the 10 paddies strategy, one of the tips, and technique. So the subtopics for today are the three main performance variables of playing, which are time, pitch, and volume. The common variable to all pipe band instruments, the timing and rhythm in marches, and strategies for developing your playing consistency. So part one is the definition of consistency, three playing performance variables, cyclic and linear time representation, and the definition of beat, pulse, and groove. So, looking firstly at the definition from Cambridge Dictionary definition, which of consistency, which is the quality of always behaving or performing in a similar way, or of things always happening in a similar way. Okay, so, and now looking at the importance of consistency, why is it important? So really, we're in the business of using music to communicate with, and the three things that we need to communicate in any language, and drumming is ultimately a language, is a performer to create the message, a listener to hear the message, and a set of rules, of fundamental rules to get that message across to the listener. So we're going to have a look at the rhythmic rules around march time. So the first thing we need to look at is are the three kind of aspects, two or three aspects of a pipe band and the instruments that are used in a pipe band. So on the left you'll see the snare drum, and then we have tenor and bass. So the first two sections are all drums, and then the third section pipes. And we're just going to have a look at the variables that are used by all of these instruments. So starting with the snare drum, we have two variables. Once the drums are tuned, and we pick up our sticks and head into performance, the only variables, the two musical audible variables that we have at our disposal as snare drummers is volume and time. So we can change our volume up and down with accents and light and shade and expression, volume expression, and then we can change our timing. That's the rhythm that we're playing. Now over to the right side, let's jump over to the pipes, and we can look at the two variables once we're again performing, the two variables that pipes have. So pipes have also time. They don't have control on volume, but they do have control on pitch. So Snare drummers, again, back to snare, we've got volume and time. Pipes have got time and pitch. Now the tenor and bass have got the same as snare, with volume and time as individual performers. And then we've got, as bass and tenor drummers, we've got the option to collectively create differences in pitch once we get started as a group. That is having the drums pitched at different notes to create, essentially create a melody possibility. So across all three of these main classifications in the pipe band, we have the one common element, and that is time. So we're going to have a look now into time and drill down into that. So now there's a couple of different ways of looking at time in a graphical representation, and the two ways I like to look at it is, firstly, in the cyclic single beat representation of a beat. And right from the top, if we start at the top, we've got our beat starts, and we come around to a groove note, a pulse note, a groove note, and a beat note for the second beat. And that just keeps going around and around and around. But looking at the division of that beat and what's going on between two beats, I just want to draw your attention then to these spaces. So again, we've got our beat at the top, and in a 2/4 march or a 3/4, any simple time march that is pointed, that is with dots and cuts written, as would be represented in the linear fashion down below, format down below. We have our beat at the top again, and then the first note we come to is the groove 1, and that's 1/3 of the way through the beat. So looking at our linear representation, we've got a blue beat and a green groove note. They're the first two notes of the four notes. So the space between the first two notes is 1/3 of a beat. Now this gap between groove 1 and pulse is 1/6 of a beat. Okay, it's half of the first group, first space. So it's a smaller space, and it's actually 1/6 of a beat. And then from the pulse to the next groove note, the second groove note in our beat subdivision, is another 1/3 gap. So just like the first gap, we've got a 1/3 gap. The second gap is also 1/3. So they're the two longer gaps. They're the ones with the dot on the note. So the dotted note is the longer note, and it runs for 1/3 of a beat. And so then we've come to our last gap, which is from the second groove note around to the beat again, to return to the beat. And that last group, or last space I should say, is also 1/6. Okay, so going across, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 notes, and after each note we've got 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth one landing on the next beat. So it goes 1/3, 1/6, 1/3, 1/6. And this is really more of a starting point that can vary slightly, but by and large that essentially is the best target to start with. Certainly at the grade 4 level and grade 3 level playing. So now that we have our beat divided up, we can now see how long we need to wait between each of those notes. And if we switch to our labeled diagram, we can see all of that. So we've divided the beat up into 6 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal divisions of a beat. So if the beat is this long, if I set my tempo and metronome to 60 BPM, we're going to have 1 click for every second. So click, click. So between each of those clicks, we're going to have 1 full revolution around the cyclic path, and divide that up into 6 little points. We'd end up with hickory dickory dock, diggity diggity dum. Okay, so we've divided that up into 6. We're going to skip the second one, and we're going to skip the 5th one, and just play the remaining 4 of the 6. So that just gives us a bit of swing feel to it. So we've got a slight delay on those groove notes. So that would sound like this. So hickory dickory dock, and it fits quite well with Mouse Ran Up the Clock, doesn't it? That's the rhythm. Hickory dickory dock, dun, 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 dun. Mouse ran up the clock. And that's the basic timing structure that we need for our simple time marches. Okay, so moving on, we've just covered the definition of consistency, the 3 playing performance variables, which are time, volume, and pitch, the cyclic and linear time representation, which we've just looked at, and then the definition of beat, pulse, and groove. So we know that the beat is the one at the top, and that happens wherever your foot lands. The pulse is halfway, and groove are the other 2 cut notes. So let's just go back to that last diagram just to confirm that. So we've got our beat at the top, we've got our pulse at the bottom, exactly halfway between the beat. So between 2 beats, beat and beat, we've got the pulse halfway. So if we just play beat and pulse, it would sound like this. So beat would be like this, right on every metronome beat. Pulse is half, divided up by 6, hickory dickory dock, and then missing the 2nd and the 5th note, we end up with Mouse Ran Up the Clock. All right, so behind all of our simple time marches, we will have an underlying kind of structure, rhythmic structure to play to. And once we've set our tempo, we can then play along to that structure. So I'm going to set my tempo, keeping it at 60. I'm going to divide the beat up into 6 subdivisions. We're going to skip number 2 and 5. Mouse ran up the clock. And now you could apply any tune to that. Scotland the Brave. He do da dee dum da dee da dum da do da dee da da dee da do dee dum da da dee da 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 dee da dum do da dum da dee da 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 dum. Okay, And that's the timing locations for all of those notes that we're kind of aiming for that feel. And that gives us our swing feel for simple time marches. Okay, so part 2, let's move on. The application of the beat, pulse and groove to the mass band 4/4, setting your metronome to the pointed march groove. Okay, so let's go in ahead and look at that. So the first score we're going to have a look at, first representation of this page is a 6-line representation of time. And the first 3 lines are beat, pulse and groove, and all of the beats on this page are labeled in with a blue color. And the first line is just all of the beats. So if I play along to my metronome, just on 60 BPM, that first line goes like this: 2, 3, 4. And repeat. That's not yet musical. We're just looking at time. There's no volume or accenting that I'm putting in. There's no metrical accenting in there yet. That would come that's not part of this presentation, but would need to be applied for your musical playing. Okay, so then line 2 is our pulses. So if I play line 2 at 60 BPM, we go just like this: 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And repeat. Okay. And then finally line 3 for our beat, pulse and groove breakdown. We're going to add in those groove notes, the 2 groove notes in between the beats and the pulses. Here we go. And a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. Okay, and repeat. All right, so that's the mouse ran up, the mouse ran up, the mouse ran up, the one and two, 4 and 1. So with that groove, that little feel. Okay. All right, line 4 is the mass band 4/4 part 1, and playing that along to that groove. And I might even just program that groove into it. So let's play along to that. Okay, so line 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so hopefully you can sort of hear the connection between the metronome groove and the drum score. Okay, and that's the aim, all right, is to match that timing with the drum score. It's as though the drum score is punching out each of those 4 notes, and we're representing and trying to emulate that sound of that metronome in terms of time. Okay, so trying to match that as closely as possible. All right. Okay, line 5 is plucking out all of the accented notes from the snare score, which are only beat, pulse and groove notes. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest. Okay, and that would be repeated, yep, with the repeat signs at the end. Okay, the last line now, number 6, is the bass and tenor score for the mass band 4/4. So playing that along with the metronome, or 1, 2, and 3, 4. Rest. And again, you would need to apply metrical accenting to that, so to be strong, weak, medium, weak through each bar on each of the beat notes. Everything else weak. Okay, good. So that's our last line. You might notice that of the last two lines, line 5 is again plucking out all of the accents from the snare score, and then line 6 is the actual bass and tenor score, not playing line 5 with those groove notes. So line 6 is a very strongly structured sequence of only beats and pulses. So there's no groove notes. And that's very intentional because of a mass band score needs to be a balance of timekeeping and musical effect. And we've got the timekeeping, which invariably is just beat notes, keeping the beat, and we've got some pulse notes just to give a bit of color to the score. Otherwise it would just be like playing to a metronome with a single beat, like that, and that'd be a little bit boring. So just to color it up a little bit and add the variation, we have pulse notes in there mixed in to fit with the snare drumming and also with the piping. Okay, so there's our 6 lines, or 6 lines for an example of beat, pulse and groove in simple time march format. The next slide is of the same thing, but this time now with all the pulse notes marked, and they're all in pink. And then our third one is all of the groove notes in green. And you'll notice there's no groove notes up in line 1 or line 2. They start here in line 3. We've got some in line 4 and 5, none in line 6. So the groove notes are kind of the party notes, the fun notes. And if you want to add, if you're writing scores and you want to add a little bit of fun and flavor and spark to your score, you can play and find those groove notes that are happening in the ensemble as a tenor. Well, actually, even from the snare perspective, listening to the piping, where are the groove notes in the piping? They don't have to be in the piping to be played. Sometimes groove notes don't line up with the accents, don't necessarily line up with the piping melody per se. Again, it's about effect. It's about creating musical effect and some degrees of tension between the pipe core, the drum core, rhythmic tension to draw the listener in. So I think that should clarify everything there. Now, moving forward onto the next one, this is the final slide here for the notation, and that's all of the beat, pulse and groove notes on the page highlighted. So the only notes that aren't highlighted left over are notes that don't fall on beat, pulse or groove, like these singles in the first bar of the snare drumming. They're faster. The middle note of each of these triplets. Okay, so, and where else? Yep, that's it really. And then those singles here as well. So incidentally, the singles, they start on a groove note and finish on a beat note, and there are 6 notes with 5 equal spaces, and so actually it looks like the first note of those 4 notes there in the middle is actually on the pulse note, but technically it's actually a little bit earlier than that pulse note, just slightly, so that's why it's not colored. Otherwise, it's all good to go. So if you can play that whole page, bass and tenors skipping line 4, playing that whole page with the metronome at a nice steady 60 BPM, with real accuracy, as a drum corps even, but solo or drum corps, you would, on a daily basis, start to really build your sense of time. And that's what it's about. It's building that sense of time so that when you start to play, it's subconsciously there and you're able to refer to it. And you'll then be better able to detect when you're going slightly off course and you can sense something, oh, that's not quite right. And you'll be able to pinpoint that much more easily. Okay. Good. All right. So now a little bit on metronomes. So we've got a couple of metronomes. The metronome I'm using right now is called Tempo Advanced. They're both made by the same company, these two, Tempo and Tempo Advanced. Some metronomes, so the screen on the right side that I've written on for simple time marches, I've actually found that a lot of metronomes don't have a subdivision. You can't divide it up into 6 notes. You can't divide the beat into 6. So what we do is we divide it into 3 and double the tempo, so we get 6 in the same time. So that squeezes the 6 in from 3 to 6. So what we do is we double the tempo up to 120 and play and set the beat split to the triplet missing the middle note, which is highlighted down the bottom. So if you've got any questions or anything like that about that, please let me know and I can help you out. Okay, good. So that's that information. And by the way, all of these slides are available. Just send me an email or contact me on Drumming Mad, and I'll send them to you. Okay, these are 2 screenshots from the Tempo Advanced metronome that I use, and we can see the one on the left, just explaining that. The one on the left, we've got our beat, groove, pulse, groove sequence, divided up into 6 little dots across the bottom of the metronome screenshot, and each of those line up with the 4 notes that are on our notation. And then we've got the equivalent version, whichever kind of metronome you have. If it doesn't have the ability to divide up into 6, you can actually do it doubling, as I've said, doubling to the tempo to 120 and then using the triplet missing the middle note. Okay. All right, so that's it. We've applied our beat, pulse and groove terminology to the Mass Band 4/4, and we've also looked at setting the metronome to pointed march groove for simple time. Okay, part 3, final section, the 4 bases of performance development, finding your pinch points. We're going to look at your ability versus tempo, and then the sound technique tower of development. with a couple of tips, scanning for pinch points and the 10 pennies. Okay, so first up, when we learn a tune, we start right at the bottom down here. We get our score and we start to build our score. So, you have your first read through, little scan through, and have a bit of an idea, get a bit of an idea of what's in this drum score overall, a couple of minutes, and then pick up your sticks and then have a bit of a go at playing the first phrase. Depending on your standard, your playing standard, your personal playing standard, and the level of the drum score, you may take longer, or you might get through it in one hit, possibly, if you're a good sight reader. Either way, you're on that path, building your score. And we get to the first bass, and first bass is playing the score with consistency of timing, great sound, and relaxed execution. Okay, so that means your timing fits with the timing matrix for that particular type of tune, whether it's a 2/4 march or a jig or a hornpipe, strass bay, whatever it is. Your timing fits that model, and you're not slowing down or speeding up, so the tempo is not changing. And you have to have good sound, so that is that all the buzzers and all of your rolls are nice and smooth and relaxed sounding, and that all of the taps are singular and accents are also singular sounding. And then all of that with relaxed execution. So you've got no sort of, as I call, pinch points where you're tensing up to try to get through them. So we're going to have a little look at those pinch points in a moment. But that's the first base on learning a drum score. And it's only the first of 4. Okay, so you've got a bit to go after that. Once you've learnt the score, and it's ideal to have learnt the score ideally before you get to band practice the following week. So if it's handed out the first week, you have a bit of a look at it, general look at it, and go home, work on it, and get it to the first base as quickly as possible, putting lots of time into developing that. And I'm going to give you some tips as well on achieving that. The second one is second base is after having removed mistakes and it's all memorized, and you've still got those 3 quality points of timing, great sound, and relaxed execution still in check from the first base. You're into the second base, and then onto third base, which is the development of the feel and expression, and seeing that you've got your accents where you want them, and everything below that is all correct. Still got our quality points checked, and that's sort of rehearsal tempo to be able to play in ensemble. Rehearsal tempo. Okay, so slightly slower, possibly, and then you're moving towards, in the final stage, to ensemble effect, and that's bringing the tempo up to your performance tempo, and making sure that you've got all of those other quality points in check. All right, and our aim up on that left side is consistency of time, sound, and execution. Okay, so all your timing is correct, the sounds are clear and correct, and the execution is relaxed and pinch point free. Okay, good. Alrighty, and now the next thing is the pinch point scanning. So this is the tip to go through a score. So you scan through a passage of music, looking for passages that are difficult to play. You can use a metronome at this point and make a small mental list of the issues that you've got. So I would suggest keeping that quite short. So the passage of music that you're playing, just go through that scanning, playing through it, maybe one part at a time. So you go through the first part, and yes, I've got that's a little bit difficult, having trouble with that. I'm slowing down, I can't quite execute at the right speed, these sorts of things. I'm tense. Any of those issues for first bass, we need to address those. So step 2, if you've got more than 2 pinch points, slow the tempo down until you have, and then go back to step 1. So you've only got 2 pinch points, and step 3 is to work on your pinch points separately, analyzing your sound and technique as you improve. Okay, so you want to achieve having your pinch points to 0 at that tempo, and then when you've got to that point, that's the end of your session. The next session is to build the tempo up, maybe 5 BPM, all right, 5 beats per minute faster. And that would take you through, and that's a great way of scanning through your drum score in that first week of receiving it. Okay. Yep, so another very important thing is the balance between clarity and spirit or movement of playing a performance of a piece of music. So we all know that we need to have a clear score. It needs to be clear, need to be able to understand clear enunciation of your drumming rudiments, everything clear. And for tenor drummers, that's visual clarity as well, good execution, basically. And on the other hand, you want to have spirit or movement in the music. And depending on the kind of tune that it is, if it's a jig or a march, if it's a jig, for example, it would need to be moving along fairly well. And to achieve that, you need to have checked off all of that technical work in that score. Okay, so it's a balance, and while you're preparing your drumming ability and capability with the drum score, you'll be bringing your tempo up to close to performance tempo through the practice development tempos. Okay, and a rough rule of thumb is to start your learning tempo at half the performance tempo. So really steady. So it might be that you're going to play Scotland the Brave. So, and Scotland the Brave will eventually be at, let's say it's going to be at 90 BPM. Okay, this is pretty brisk and pretty realistic for performance tempo. We don't want Scotland the Brave to be too slow. It could also be, though, that you've got a certain percentage of your band that can't quite handle that tempo. That's fine too. I mean, there's a range, and that range is important. Pipe major, leader of the band, it's their job to judge that, make that call. So setting that tempo. Okay. So if it's 90, then I would suggest we bring that down to 45 to start learning the score, which is quite slow, but it gives us and gives your arms and all of your technique a good chance to come in. Okay. So it really gives you lots of time to weed out and feel that relaxed feeling. You should feel relaxed at that tempo. Okay, and that's the feeling that you want to take through the development tempos. All right, and this is one of my favorite diagrams. I take all of my students through this sequence, and that is the marriage of sound and technique. Okay, so we know what sound we want. We know the technique that we need to use to play that sound. So we match the two, bring the two together. Okay. So that's that, for example, would be starting over here on the sound side. Okay, we need to play a 7-stroke roll, for example. Well, I know I need to use my buzz stroke, and I need to have a tap stroke at the end. So I go across to the technique side, and I'm playing my 7-stroke roll over and over and over. And if I'm new at 7-stroke rolls, I'm going to get over to the technique side, and the roll's going to sound not as good, possibly, if the technique is developing. So then I go back over and I check and make sure I try and get the sound sounding better, but I lose a bit of technique quality. So back over to the technique, back to sound, and zigzag all the way up until the two come together. And once we've got the two married together and you've done all of that work to develop whatever that rudiment is, and this is really just at a small micro section, like a rudiment or a very short phrase, okay, or a short sequence. Once you've got those two together and matched together, then you can start increasing the speed, keeping those two together. Okay, increase the speed to maximum speed, and then endurance is the next stage, where you can play it fast for as long as you like, nice and relaxed, very clear playing. That's the model that I take all rudiments through. So rudiment or short sequence. Okay, good. All right, and yep, another tip we have is the 10 pennies tip. This is a great one. That we start with 10 pennies or 10 coins stacked on one side. I don't know if you can see my table, but a stack of coins you could have, or you could have 10 matches, anything at all, just 10 little things. Stack them on one side. Play your target phrase, whatever it is. And if you're satisfied with the quality checklist, so all the accents are nice, clear, taps are nice and clear, there's no rolls, so that's okay. We're going to move one coin over to the other side and do it again. Okay, good. Second coin. And step 4, as you can see, if it fails, you take all of those coins back. And it's very interesting. You can get to number 8 coins over here, or 9, and you just can't push through and get all 10 if you're being truthful and honest with what you're hearing and your judgment of that. So it's just that's part of the process, actually, is to relax your mind and get all those pennies across. Okay, so great little tip. All right, so recap of part 3 is the 4 bases of performance development: finding your pinch points, your ability versus tempo, so not to play something too fast before you're ready, and the sound technique tower of development. Okay, so bringing together sound and technique together. All right, good. And then and then the 2 tips, which is the pinch point scan and the 10 pennies. So, all right, and here's our final that diagram again of the four stages to get it up to performance. So This first stage probably takes a fair bit of time getting to first base. Try and put in all of your hard work into that first base, in as early as you can. So as soon as you get a new score, dedicate a good chunk of time each day. Ideally each day. We all know that we can't get to everything every day. Miss a day if you need to, but certainly put in a lot of effort as soon as possible, because that puts your mind into, okay, I'm in work mode here. I've got to build this, and you will find that you improve faster that way. Okay, good. And I think that might be it. So we've covered consistency, what it is, how to improve it. We've looked at time, phrase we didn't go too deeply into, but we will probably cover that on the next one, I think, a bit more. But we certainly covered a lot of detail on beat, pulse, and groove, on those three layers of time, and we looked at tempo. We looked at drive a little bit. That is when the tempo's pushing and driving, so giving the spark, the 90 BPM of Scotland the Brave, for example. And we looked at a couple of tips, so the 10 penny strategy, and then we looked at how technique is important. So there we have it. All right. I hope that's all been good. If you've got any follow-up questions, you can reach me at drummingmad.com, just in the contact us part. And good luck. Go forth and drum hard. Do lots of practice. Another little reminder is that the Pipe Band Association certificate syllabus is up on Pipe Bands Australia website, starting with the preliminary certificate. And there are 4 levels: preliminary, elementary, intermediate, and advanced. And of the 4 levels, there are 3 parts to it. So there's the playing, so to see what standard you're at, and you've covered off on that preliminary standard if you're starting there. The next is the writing, so very important for composition and for writing drum scores, and then a bit of theory as well. So there's 3 components for each of those levels. So preliminary has 3, elementary's got 3, the same 3 components for all of the 4 levels. So I urge all players in a pipe band to do their preliminary, and at a minimum preliminary and elementary, these 2. If you're teaching, intermediate would be the minimum, and if you want to do the whole kit and caboodle, you can go on and do the big one, which is the advanced. But certainly those first 2 for all pipe band members, recommend doing those, because it just gives everybody in the band a common starting point, foundation, and everybody knows what we're talking about when we use that musical jargon. So it's good for communication. It also gives you confidence. You know, okay, I've got all of the prerequisites for this level of playing. All right. Good. Okay. Push yourself, drive on, and we'll see you at the next workshop. See you later.